Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to The Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare, Act 4, Scene 1. In our previous video, I had told you that Act 4 is the trial scene. In this scene, we see the Duke, Antonio, Shylock, Slarino, Bassanio, Portia, Graciano, and Nerissa. The Duke informs Antonio that his opponent Shylock is a cruel person. Antonio knows the situation and thanks the Duke because he has tried his best to convince Shylock to be sympathetic. Now Antonio is ready to face the circumstances. Shylock appears in the court. The Duke says that keeping in view the great misfortunes of Antonio, Shylock would change his decision of taking the pound of flesh. But Shylock says that if he is not granted justice, the laws of Venice would be mocked at by the world. He clarifies that he is bent on crying for justice simply because he hates Antonio. Bassanio reminds Shylock that this is most inhuman manner of feeding one's grudges. He further says that people do not destroy something simply because they hate it. Shylock argues with him in his own way. Antonio tells Bassanio that it is no good trying to change the thinking of Shylock, just as it is useless to give a moral lecture to the wolf that has killed the lamb. Ultimately, Antonio begs the court to pronounce the judgment. Now we move on. Bassanio's speech. Bassanio says, "For thy 3,000 ducats, here is 6." He tells Shylock that I offer you 6,000 ducats instead of your 3,000 ducats. Shylock, what judgment shall I dread, doing were in 6 parts and every part a ducat? I would not draw them, I would have my bond. Shylock in reply says, if every one of your 6,000 ducats was divided into 6, and every part was a ducat, I would not accept them. I want the fulfillment of my bond. So Shylock is not at all interested in the money anymore. He just wants his pound of flesh. Duke, how shalt thou hope for mercy, rendering none? So the Duke asks him, how shall you hope for God's mercy if you show no mercy yourself? Shylock, what judgment shall I dread doing no wrong? Meaning, what sentence can be passed on me when I have, when I have broken no law, when I have done nothing wrong? You have among you many a purchased slave, which, like your asses and your dogs and mules, you use in abject and in slavish parts because you bought them. He goes on to justify himself by saying that you Christians have many slaves which you have bought, and like your asses, dogs, and mules, you use them as slaves only because you bought them. Let them be free, marry them to your heirs. Why sweat thy under burthens? Let their beds be made as soft as yours, and let their palates be seasoned with such viands. Then he goes on to say that suppose I tell you that give them freedom and marry them to your children. Why do they perspire carrying such heavy load? Let them sleep on beds as comfortably as you do, and let them have as rich food to eat, what will you answer? It says, you will answer, the slave are ours. You are going to tell me that the slave are yours and therefore you are likely to do whatever you want with them. So do I answer you. The pound of flesh which I demand of him is dearly bought. And so he says, similarly, the pound of flesh which he demands from Antonio has been bought by him at a high price. 'Tis mine, it is mine, and I will have it. And he intends to have his pound of flesh. He goes on to say, if you deny me, fie upon your law. If you refuse, if you say no, then it is a shame upon your law. There is no force in the decrees of Venice. I stand for judgment. Shall I have it? He says it will appear that the laws of Venice are not binding. I ask for the judgment of the court. Tell me whether I shall have it. So here we see Shylock is being very adamant that he does not want any money. He just wants the pound of flesh. Duke, upon my power, I may dismiss this court unless Valerio, a learned doctor whom I have sent for to determine this, come here today. So the Duke tells him, on the strength of my authority, I may adjourn the court unless Valerio, a learned doctor whom I have sent for to decide the case, arrives here today. And Valerio says, my lord, here stays without a messenger with letters from the doctor, new come from Padua. So Valerio tells the Duke that, my lord, there is a messenger from the doctor, that is Dr. Valerio, standing outside with the letters. He has just arrived from Padua. Duke, bring us the letter, call the messenger. So he says, bring the letter and call in the messenger. Bassanio, good cheer Antonio. So Bassanio tries to cheer up Antonio and tells him to be happy, to cheer up. What man? Courage yet. So he tells him, come man, have a little more courage. The Jew shall have my flesh, blood, bones and all, ere thou shalt lose for me one drop of blood. So Bassanio tells him, I shall allow the Jew to have all my flesh, blood, bones, before you lose one drop of your blood for me. Here, showing us that Bassanio is ready to sacrifice himself for the sake of Antonio. This shows us the great bond of friendship between Antonio and Bassanio. And Antonio replies, I am a tainted wether of the flock, meetest for death. Meaning, I am just like a diseased sheep. Tainted means sick, wether, sheep. That I am just like a diseased sheep in the flock, more liable to death than the others. The weakest kind of fruit drops earliest to the ground. And so let me. He gives another example, that the weakest fruit falls soonest from the tree. And let this be my fate. You cannot better be employed, Bassanio, than to live still and write mine epitaph. He tells Bassanio, it is a better occupation for you, Bassanio, to continue to live, that you may write the inscription on my tombstone. So here Antonio has given the examples of a diseased sheep which has to die first, or a rotten fruit on a tree which falls quicker than the others. Similarly, comparing himself to be something rotten, that he has to die first. And he tells Bassanio that Bassanio is better occupied. The better occupation for Bassanio is that he continues to live after Antonio so that he may write the inscription on Antonio's tombstone. Enter Nerissa. Nerissa is dressed like a lawyer's clerk. Duke tells her, "Came you from Padua, from Bellerio? Have you come from Dr. Bellerio at Padua?" Nerissa, "From both, my lord. Bellerio greets your grace." She says, "Yes, from Padua and from Bellerio, my lord. Bellerio sends his greetings to your grace." And she hands over a letter to the Duke. In the meantime, Bassanio looks at Shylock and he tells him, "Why dost thou whet thy knife so earnestly?" Means, why do you sharpen your knife so keenly? And Shylock replies, "To cut the forfeiture from that bankrupt there, to cut off the pound of flesh which has been forfeited by this bankrupt, that is Antonio." Gratiano, "Not on thy soul, but on thy soul, harsh Jew." It is not on the sole, SOLE, of your shoe, the sole of the shoe. He says you are not sharpening the knife on the sole of your shoe, but you are sharpening the knife on your soul, SOUL. That you are sharpening the knife, he tells him. "Thou makest thy knife keen," means you are sharpening your knife. "But no metal can, no, not the hangman's axe, bear half the keenness of thy sharp envy." And he tells him, but no metal, even the knife of a hangman, could ever become so sharp as your envy or your malice. "Can no prayers pierce thee?" So he asks him, "Can no prayers penetrate your heart?" Shylock, "No, none that thou hast wit enough to make. No, none that you are clever enough to make." And Gratiano then goes on and says, "O be thou damned inexcredible dog, and for thy life let justice be accused. Thou almost makest me waver in my faith to hold opinion with Pythagoras." He says, "O may you be accursed, unyielding dog. Justice is to be blamed for the fact that it allows you to live." And he tells him, "You almost make me doubtful of the Christian faith and inclined to believe in the theory of Pythagoras." What is the theory of Pythagoras? That souls of animals infuse themselves into the trunks of men. Thy currish spirit governed a wolf who hanged for human slaughter. Even from the gallows did his fell soul fleet, and whilst thou layest in the unhallowed dam, infused itself in thee. For thy desires are wolfish, bloody, starved, and ravenous. So Gratiano goes to explain the theory of Pythagoras, that the souls of animals, they sometimes enter the bodies of men. He tells Shylock that Shylock's vile spirit, his evil spirit, once inhabited the body of a wolf who was hanged for killing men. Meaning, there was a wolf who used to kill men, and this wolf was hanged. Even as he was hanged on the gallows, his fierce soul sped away from him to where you were still unborn in the body of your vile mother and entered into you. That is, that when the wolf was hanged, the soul of the wolf came out from him and it went straight into the body of his mother while she was carrying him. It went into her womb while he was still not yet born. It entered into Shylock for all his inclinations, for all the Shylock, till thou canst rail the seal from my bond. So Shylock tells him, until you can speak words of abuse which will actually remove the legal seal from my agreement, you are only putting, thou but offendest thy lungs to speak so loud. Repair thy wit, good youth, or it will fall to cureless ruin. I stand here for law. So he tells Brasciano, you can go on speaking words of abuse, which will actually remove the legal seal from the agreement. You are only putting your lungs to useless labor in speaking like this, meaning you can go on saying whatever you want, but no effect is going to take place. Try to cultivate a more finished sense of humor, or it will break down altogether. He tells him, I am here to claim the judgment of the law. And Duke says, this letter from Bellario doth commend. He goes on to say that this particular letter has come from Bellario, who recommends a young and learned lawyer to our court. And so he says, where is he? Where is this lawyer? And Nerissa, she says, he attendeth here hard by, means he is present here, close at hand, to know your answer whether you'll admit. He is waiting for your answer to know whether you will admit him. And Duke, with all my heart, means I will admit him wholeheartedly. Some 3 or 4 of you, go give him courteous conduct to this place. Meantime, the court shall hear Bellario's letter. So he says, let some 3 or 4 of the men go and escort him to this place with due courtesy. In the meantime, I will read out the letter, Bellario's letter, to all who are present in the court. And he reads the letter which has been brought. Clerk reads, Your Grace shall understand that at the receipt of my letter, I am very sick. The letter which has been sent by Dr. Bellario states that I wish to inform Your Grace that I was very sick at the time of receiving your letter, because the Duke had sent a letter to Dr. Bellario asking him to come to this trial. And so in reply, Dr. Bellario has sent a letter saying that when I received your letter, I was unwell. But in that instant that your messenger came, in loving visitation was with me a young doctor of Rome. And he tells him, but at the moment that your messenger arrived, there happened to be with me in friendly consultation a young doctor of Rome whose name is Balthazar. I acquainted him with the cause in controversy between the Jew and Antonio the merchant. So it is stated in the letter that Dr. Bellario told the person who was with him about he told him about this particular problem that is taking place, the controversy that is there between the Jew and Antonio. We turned over many books, and so he says that when he told Balthazar about the nature of the case and the quarrel between the Jew and Antonio, both of them consulted many legal books together. And Dr. Bellario also told Balthazar his views about the case. which bettered with his own learning, the greatness whereof I cannot enough commend, comes with him at my importunity. So he says that the two of them, when Balthazar was informed about the case, the two of them went through various legal books. Dr. Valerio also told Balthazar his own views, and the fact that having been provided with not only Dr. Valerio's views but his own views about the whole case, the learning which he's got, which is of high quality, and to praise which I do not have enough words for, he says that he has come to Venice at the request of Dr. Valerio, meaning that he has sent Balthazar to Venice for this case to take his place and thus fulfill the needs of the Duke. He goes on to say, to fill up my grace's request in my stead means to, to fill the request which had been sent by the Duke. So Balthazar will take in my stead means in his place, in the place of Dr. Valerio. I beseech you, let his lack of years be no impediment. So he says, I request you, I ask that his youthfulness should not be considered a reason for keeping back your highest esteem for him. To let him lack a reverent estimation, for I never knew so young a body with so old a head. So he says, he requests him that please don't just look at his youthfulness. That should not be considered as a reason for keeping back your highest esteem for him. For Dr. Valerio believes that he has never known a man so young in years and so mature in intelligence. He writes further that he leaves him in the hope that the Duke will receive him graciously, and if he gives him a trial, this will show up his praise even better. I will leave him to your gracious acceptance, whose trial shall better publish his commendation. That when he is allowed to take part in this trial, the way he fights the trial, it will show up how his praise is going to be even better. So, in this particular speech, there we read about how the letter states that Dr. Valerio was supposed to come for the trial, but in his place has come Balthazar. Dr. Valerio states that when the messenger from the Duke had come to him, he was unwell, and at the same time, Balthazar was with him. He acquainted him about the case that was there, the controversy between the Jew and Antonio. Both of them consulted many law books. Dr. Valerio furnished him with his opinion, and which of course be bettered with the learning or intelligence of Balthazar himself too. It was Dr. Valerio who requested Balthazar to come for the trial, and he now asks the Duke to give him a chance, saying that he should not merely look at his youthfulness, but give him a chance, give him a trial, and then he will get to know how intelligent Balthazar is. We know that here Balthazar is actually Portia, who is dressed up as the lawyer and is now going to fight the case for Antonio. I'm going to be stopping here. I hope all of you have understood. In case of doubts, please keep them ready for the interactive class session that we will be having. Till then, take care of yourself, keep revising, and we will continue in the next video. Thank you.